I'm Bill Mahaney from Toronto. I, uh, I've known Volli. I knew Volli for about 30 years, I guess. We worked together for all over the place in Estonia, Latvia, Finland, the Baltics, Scandinavia, and South America and the Andes. And I first met him in 1988 when I got a message that an Estonian scientist wanted to come and visit my lab. Uh, to which I replied, sure, no problem. So I picked Volli up. We toured the lab. We ended up on my back deck of my house drinking beer, throwing walnuts, I think, out to the squirrels. And his English then was daunting. He was learning it very, very slowly. So conversations were limited. And he left here. He went to Lethbridge, Alberta, off in the west, to visit Rene Berendret, a friend of mine. He visited his lab, and then he went to Edmonton to work with Nat Rutter at the University of Alberta. When he came back 7 months later, he was totally proficient in English. He was even telling jokes in English. We had a great time. We talked about it, close interests that we had in various areas of science. And then we promised to try to get together. And then he left, and I went off to Sweden on exchange there for a time. And then I discovered Scandinavia was very interested in Estland, in Estonia. And there was money for science. And since they wanted me to work up in the Tarna Mountains, I spun a tale that I couldn't do this without an Estonian scientist colleague of mine by the name of Volli Kalmust. So all of a sudden, Volli was patched onto my program and wound up in Estonia with a chunk of money to work for the summer for 3 or 4 weeks, and then went back to Estonia. And my project kept running on until 1993. And Volli was on it every summer. I had field classes there from Canada. Volli fitted in perfectly. My students loved him a hell of a lot better than they liked me, I'm sure. And we had many adventures up in the Tarna Mountains, working on the small glaciers there and working out glacial stratigraphy and soil pedology and so forth. And there are many stories I could relate about our time there, but I think the most cogent story was Volli working with the students. He was very easy for him to slip into groups and to talk and to speak openly about and look for discussions that could advance our project. And so that wound around pretty well. And in 1993, if I've got the dates right, I got an invitation to Venezuela for a couple of weeks to look over the stratigraphy there and to liaise with a chap who later became a postdoc student of mine, Max Pizzata. And then I found that George Soros built the International Science Foundation, and he had money for Eastern Europeans to work with Westerners like myself. So I applied in 1994, and I got money to bring Volli down to work with us, which was a godsend because it's a very tough place. And at that time, I was having knee trouble. I was even wondering if I was going to be able to get around there. I managed to do this, but not quite as well as Volli could. He was more or less like a mountain goat. He could go anywhere. And so 94 wound down to 95 and 95 to 96, and George Soros kept funding us. And that kept moving along until about 2000 or so. And there are many stories I can think of. In the Andes, it's a really steep slopes, very, very tough working area, and very interesting stratigraphies to work on. Many of these are common to glacial geologists, so I won't bother speaking about them here. There's no need to do that. But I guess one of the key things that I can think about with Volli in the Andes is that at one point when when we were down low, off the mountain, essentially, we got confronted by a very aggressive dog that I thought was going to probably attack us. Not phasing Volli at all. He walked right up to the dog, talking, and the dog sat down, where we were all amazed at this happening. I even called him the dog whisperer, and he got quite a kick out of that. I said, if you can whisper to a dog, he said, why not? He said, I can whisper to people. And so we made that into a kind of joke. But we had some interesting times there, and Volli kept getting involved in administration and the University of Tartu. And so as a result of that, his time there became shorter and shorter, and eventually he just couldn't do it anymore after around 2005. And so I quit the program. I told everybody I was going to move off to the Alps and pursue a classical interest. I've read classics for years just as an entertainment. But along the way, I focused on Hannibal and the question of where he crossed the Alps. And I looked at the environmental information that was in there. I talked this over with Volli. And for 3 or 4 years, he was able to join me in the Alps, European Alps, around Mount Viso. And so we got a program going there on the Hannibal problem, which eventually we solved by incorporating a microbiologist in the team who could work up the bacterial specifics of mules and horses. And of course, we can date most of that material by radiocarbon. So that worked along. Volli had to slowly drop off this. And I would see him occasionally in Toronto because apparently there's an Estonian diaspora in Toronto, and he had connections with them, and sometimes would have to fly here. And when he did, we would have lunch, or we would have supper, or we'd have certainly a few beers. But I noticed along the way, he tired easily. He admitted he was getting very tired from all of the stresses and strains of trying to work with the problems the university had. He explained one time, he said, we have all kinds of problems. We have problems with sewage. We have problems with professors. We have problems with the buildings, keeping the roofs on the buildings. And along the way, I could see that this was really tiring him, and not unexpectedly, he showed it. And he even said to me, around about, say, 2015 maybe, that he said he'd lost all geology. He couldn't do it anymore. He'd forgotten it all. He said there were so many problems with the university that geology had taken a vacation for him. Anyway, we kept that up right until he died. And all I can say is he was an esteemed friend. I thought of him basically as a brother. If I'd had a brother, I would wish it would have been Volli. I liked him very, very much as a man. I very much liked him as a scientist. He had a brilliant scientific mind. He could hone in on a question very, very, very quickly. He could develop the methods to try to deal with it. When we got the data, he was very good at getting rid of stuff and keeping the cogent material. And so we developed a number of papers. I'm not even sure how many we published together. It certainly would be up in the range of about 50. We went to and gave papers at international conferences. We even ran a conference in Venezuela, in the Andes. We had something like 75 or 80 people show up from all over the place. And Volli was instrumental in making that whole thing work very, very well. It also incorporated a field trip in the mountains, which was very rigorous, very difficult. One chap from New Zealand, even had a heart attack up there. And of course, Volli took over the extraordinary problem of trying to get this guy off the mountain safely. And we were able to do this. He recovered. Part of it was altitude sickness that brought on the heart problem, heart murmur. But he was the man who took charge. started ordering students around, ordering people in the task of trying to get this guy down off the mountain. He did many things like this. And I can even remember one time pulling up in front of the hotel, and there's Volli. He had the old Jeep that we had jacked up, and he dropped the transmission box out of it. He didn't like the humming and the resonation that was coming from it, and he fixed it on the spot and put the transmission back up into the vehicle. And I asked him, "Where in the hell is the mirror? Where's the manual for this?" He said, "Oh, I don't need a manual. I was running everything by ear." I said, "Oh, okay." So we got in it, started the vehicle up, and it started, and off we went, and it rode much easier, but much more agreeable with the road. So those are some of the comments that I've got for Volli, for my recollection of him, which is I have to admit, is growing dimmer all the time, but I still have him up in my mind. I still look for emails from him occasionally, thinking that it's just so unextraordinary for a guy like that to die the way he did. But anyway, that's my story, and I hope you benefit from it. And that's about all I can really say, I think. That's it.